Bennett, the multi-county livestock extension agent for Pasco, Sumter, and Hernando counties. I'm going to present to you some concepts today concerning quiet handling of beef cattle. These concepts on cattle behavior and the physiology that results from handling cattle can affect your cattle performance and ultimately your bottom line. So let's talk first about why we should strive for quiet handling. First of all, it's going to facilitate the handling of the cattle and the whole process itself. It's very intertwined. Also, it reduces stress, and we're going to talk about this physiology in some of the upcoming slides. It improves safety of the animals and the people involved. Also, animal welfare is embedded in this as well, because we want to put our best foot forward and think about this as part of our whole beef quality assurance program. It's all together. And we're also creating long-term memory for the cattle, and we want that memory to be positive to encourage good behavior later. So keep this in mind. If you decide to do something yourself, it's not stressful. But if you are made to do something, it is stressful. And we see that concept play out all the time when we show cattle a hole and they decide to go that path. We're letting them make that decision on their own. We're not forcing them to go that direction. So let's discuss a few ways to reduce stress in cattle. First of all, visual barriers can be very useful. But as we all know, that's difficult to do in Florida because most of these barriers are also going to be barriers to wind flow, and it's too hot in cow pens to put up many barriers. But if we can put a few in strategic locations, then that can be helpful. Reducing noise, which kind of alarms the cattle, we want to try to do that as much as possible. Also, reduction of shadows and reduction of flapping objects. These two concepts are related to cattle in a way because they have depth perception issues, and so anytime there's something moving or there's shadows, it can cause them to balk because they can't really pick up on what's going on there. Cattle vision and movement play a large role in stress reduction or stress creation in cattle. Cattle do have wide-angle vision due to their protection from predators, but they have difficulty with depth perception. So solid walls prevent distraction and can prevent their attempts at escape. Moving objects can tend to distort their vision and cause some difficulties. Their poor depth perception makes them balk at certain things that might be in the cow pen, so that's a consideration to keep in mind. Uniform illumination is helpful, and consider areas that are getting dark or light that might cause them some stress. Uniform color is going to be helpful. No bright colors than dark colors. Consider that when painting squeeze chutes, because they will notice differences and things like that. Also, use their herding instinct as much as possible because they do like to have other cow company. Alright, what cattle hear can also affect their stress level. So keeping things as mellow as possible is always going to be helpful. Yelling, real loud yelling, and high-pitched noises are going to affect cattle negatively. So we try to, as best as possible, keep noises familiar and as low-key as possible. So one of the familiar noises I'm sure that they hear, maybe they hear those squeeze chute doors opening and closing, and they're going to have some negative association with that. And there's some things we just can't help. But then there are some things that can be positive to them, and you can think about it when people honk their horn to feed cattle out in the pasture. That has a positive effect and positive reinforcement for those cattle. So cattle do remember, and that's something we always need to keep in mind. There are several concepts to keep in mind when trying to reduce stress. The first is to always reduce isolation. Cows love the company of other cows, and whenever possible, try to never leave one cow by herself. Handling memory can be used to create a good memory. Over time, as those memories build, the stress level will continue to drop in your cattle. Slower movement is helpful. This kind of goes against our get it done mode of operation, but it pays off huge benefits in the end. Gentle contact. Always use your prods and hot shots as little as possible to create lower stress. The concept of a slower workday and that cost of time that you're going to add to it is going to benefit you by gaining back money on your calving rate due to lower stress. So we're going to look at that physiology next. Cattle can have stress responses in a couple of different ways. First off, there can be behavior change, or in other words, they just get crazier. And that has the indirect effect of lowering the nutritional status of the cow. She's going to wear off and stress so much that she's not going to gain and do as well. There's also physiological changes from a hormone response, and this is a direct effect of cortisol. And at the Florida Cattlemen's Institute and Allied Trade Show in 2019, Dr. Cook went over this response and how it's detrimental to production in cattle. So the physiological effects of stress come from a cortisol effect in the body. And some of those direct interactions with normally occurring hormones can cause some of the following things. It can hinder puberty attainment in heifers. It can lower conception rates. It can reduce immune function, not only by lowering health status, but also can interfere with vaccine effectiveness. So think about revaccinating cows. You want low stress for them so that those vaccines actually can work. Additionally, it can also cause reduced rumen function. So specifically with reproduction, cortisol can interfere with those hormone pathways and can affect not only ovulation, but also conception itself, and then the whole process of pregnancy establishment can be hindered. So anything that hormones are involved with, cortisol can interfere with. And all of these concepts are very important to your bottom line. So it should be our goal to not breed the stress to begin with. And what I mean by that is always be on the lookout for opportunities to cull for bad temperament and get them out of the herd as soon as possible. As cows and bulls get older, they also get ornerier, and their stress level reaction can just be heightened. And consider this, when you choose for temperament, for good temperament, it's a free reproduction, nutrition, and immune booster to your herd. So how are we going to adapt heifers to human handling? And we're talking about heifers specifically because we want to get them off to a good start so that they stay in your herd and they stay productive for the rest of their herd life. Now, I say this is kind of as a joke. We're not going to halter break these heifers, but halter breaking is a concept or exemplification of getting animals exposed to human handling to the point where they're so used to it that it is no longer bothersome to them. So while we're not halter breaking our heifers, we do have some concepts that can help with exposure to humans and to help them have low stress. Now, I say this as kind of a joke to feed them a lot, which heifers do get fed more than our grown cows, of course, but that is one level of exposure to humans that can cause a low stress situation and get them acclimated to being around us and not being so stressed out when they are in a situation where they have to be put in the cow pens and things like that. Something that may be more doable for most people is in your heifer lots, just ride through them more frequently. So if you can make a point of riding through them, to check their health, which you're probably going to do anyway, but also just gently go through them horseback, or if you're in a vehicle, and maybe even sometimes on foot, because They need to see you in different situations so that their stress is not associated with seeing something new and seeing you perform a different behavior. And perhaps the goal should be handle them gently for the first 24 months to set that handling memory on a positive note. And if you can make it a goal to work gently with just one group of animals on your ranch, make it your heifers, because you can program them for the future for positive behavior. Starting there and then trying to incorporate quiet handling to the rest of your herd will pay benefits. So one of our best tools for low stress movement of cattle is using that flight zone that they have to keep them from over responding to us. So cattle will have a fight or flight response. They want to flee from prey, and they will fight agitation. So we want to be mindful of their personal space, which is going to vary with the temperament of the animal. Some animals have a zone very close to them if they're very calm, and some animals you don't have to get within 2 miles of them, they're going to have a response. And it's going to decrease, of course, as the cattle are gentler and more gentle handling. Extremely tame livestock, for that very reason, can be very difficult to deal with sometimes. You can't get them to move. And then don't forget that this flight zone also includes areas above the cattle. So if you're on a catwalk, you need to keep that in mind, that is still going to have a flight zone area when you're moving them. So the flight zone incorporates two different concepts. One is the large circle around them that is the zone, the border for where they don't want you to get any closer to them, but if you're outside of that border, they're content to stay where they're at. And the second aspect of the flight zone is when you are outside that circle and you move in toward that point of the shoulder, either way you pivot left or right or forward or back from that is going to cause the animals to move one direction or the other. Here's another way to look at the point of balance. So the P is labeling that line into that point of balance area on the shoulder. So if you're standing at point A, you're outside of the circle. So the animal, if that circle is its zone of movement, it should not move when you're standing there. If you move into point B, the animal should move forward. So even if you're in C, you're outside of that circle and the animal should not move. But also, I'm going to try to demonstrate for you today about using that flight zone to move cattle. And we're going to use my daughter's steers for State Fair and her Polk County Youth Fair. And we're hoping that they cooperate because they are kind of lazy. So the point of the flight zone point is right at their shoulder. And if you're behind it, they should move forward. If you're in front of it, they should move backwards. Now, with them being pretty gentle, I'm going to have to get closer to that point, that flight zone point, to have an effect. If they were more skittish, then I wouldn't have to be so close. So we're going to see if this is going to work. So first, I'm going to try to move him back. So I'm going to come in front of his shoulder, and I'm going to approach him this way. And this is going to make him want to move backwards. Now, to move him back forward, I'm going to go behind that point of his shoulder, and I'm going to come in at an angle. And hopefully, if he can see me, he doesn't want to be petted. Okay, he's not going to cooperate. But usually you would come out from this angle, and he should move forward if he's not extremely gentle. So now we'll try the other steer, because he doesn't like me as much as the white steer does. So he's watching me. Just going to get this one to move in front. So I'm going to back him up, and then I'm going to try to move him forward. And even with this other steer in between us, I can still approach that flight zone to get him to move back and forth. So we're going to move. So we'll try to move him back again, and then I'm going to move him down the fence. So I'm going to keep pressing his flight zone here, and he will move back up for me. This one's not going to move. He has no flight zone anymore. but this one still does, and so he moves for us pretty easily. So the idea is to work with that flight zone, and if they are more skittish, that flight zone is going to be much further away. But if you can kind of approach it at the right angle, then you can use that for moving your cattle. Okay, now we've got the gray steer in here by himself. So he's going to be a little more agitated because he doesn't have his buddy in here. But also, we're thinking it might make it easier to see him move away from us by using this flight zone. So if I'm going to move him, let's say I want to keep moving him around to where I'm at now. I want to get behind that shoulder. And he'll move. Now if I want to stop him and move him back, I have to get in front. And we'll move him back along the other fence. He thinks I'm all petty. So he's not as agitated as we thought he would be. But, no bumps. So, it works. It is a little bit easier to see when the cattle are a little bit more rambunctious, but we decided to use them to kind of show a slower approach to moving with the point of the shoulder. So cattle, being herd animals, as we mentioned before, become stressed when they're isolated, so we always want to try to remove that stress. They follow the leader, and as you know, once one animal finds the way through the gate, everybody tends to follow behind them. But keeping that in mind, they're going to move. You need to move the front of the line and not the rear to get them to move. So if you're in a chute and nobody's moving, you need to go to the front and get the front animal to move. Don't try to push on the back to get the animals to move, because it's just going to pile them up on top of each other. There are definitely breed differences, and breeds are going to differ in how docile they are, but also how they react to stress. And this can be seen sometimes excessively stressed cattle, especially in the Brahma influenced cattle. It can lead to death very easily because the body just reacts terribly to it. So just keeping those type things in mind will help you to keep the low-key stress level going in your herd. Always remember that previous experience and that cattle memory of handling is going to be either helpful to you or it's going to be a hazard to you. So we want to always make sure that our first experiences are good ones, and to maintain that good level of stress in our cattle, or a minimal level of stress rather. And remember that their perception of you is going to be based on how they've experienced you in the past. So if they only see you on horseback or only see you on foot, when you do something different, it's gonna alert them to something that might be causing stress to them. So their experiences with you in different situations over time will be helpful to them. It's also helpful to keep in mind that our cattle pen designs can be helpful to us in reducing stress in the animals as well. Circular pens tend to reduce stress. It's been shown in research, and the time moving them by 50%. So if we can keep them moving in that serpentine type pattern, it's more relaxing to them. And feedlots and meat processing plants use this concept all the time and use this in their pen setups because they have to handle animals so much. So solid sides also aid in movement. However, as we've mentioned, in Florida it's difficult to do that, but if we can do that periodically in some of those more difficult areas, it can be helpful. So let's summarize some of our concepts. Use of behavioral principles can improve efficiency of livestock handling and reduce stress. And when we reduce that stress, it improves weight gain, reproductive performance, and animal health. And livestock should be handled gently with minimal noise and should be treated humanely. All a part of our beef quality assurance program to provide our customers with confidence in buying our products. So always remember, don't tolerate any mistreating of cattle. This is not good for the animals, for us, or our beef industry. If you have any questions about this presentation or would like to contact me, I can be reached at the email address on the screen or at the phone number listed. And thank you, and I appreciate being able to present this for you.